So, this, by most people's standards, probably isn't even a fair comparison, but it's one that I'm making because, as with almost all the videos that I've made, they're things that I care about or something that's directly relevant to what I'm thinking about or what's going on in my life. So, right now, I'm in the process of trying to find another quote unquote companion device because, as much as I hate to admit it, the iPhone isn't going anywhere. Okay. And I don't mean Apple as a company. I mean the iPhone in terms of it being in my pocket. It's going to stay there because of iMessage. And that's really it. That's the truth of the matter. And that's it. Yeah. That's almost like a hard statement right there. But in terms of a companion device, because I don't like the way that the iPhone handles Bluetooth when I'm in the car. I don't really even like looking at iOS. I like having something else on me that I can use for more functions or the other functions that I am not using the iPhone for. So browsing the web, listening to music, not wireless payments or contactless payments because I will use the iPhone for that or the Fitbit when I'm actually wearing it. So yeah, it's browsing the web, connecting to music or listening to music, connecting to the radio, things like that. Now you might say, well, okay, I get that. Why are we comparing a phone that technically hasn't even been released yet and almost a 3 generation old phone? Um, and the reason is as some of you might know, I recently purchased a Google Pixel 6a, and I sent that up to my dad to use because, and it took me, I just realized that I guess get my new phone or every other Pixel. So I got him a Pixel 2 a while ago, then I got him a Pixel 4, and then now I've got him the Pixel 6a. So yeah, looking online, the longevity of support is something that I have been concerned about. And truth be told, I got him the Pixel 4 too soon because there still was another Android update for his Pixel 2. And had I waited, I would have ended up getting him the Pixel 5. And then had I got him the Pixel 5, the support for that would have continued through until next year, but I didn't. So now I said, well, Dad, I don't want you walking around with a phone that Google technically no longer supports. So even though he still probably would have, I think, until October of this year, I went ahead and just sent him up the Pixel 6a, found a good price on eBay. But what that means is he's probably not going to be using the Pixel 4 anymore. And for me, even though I just said everything about not walking around with a phone that Google no longer supports, for any of my backup, companion, secondary devices, whatever you want to call them, a phone that Google doesn't technically support is perfectly fine. Apple still supports my iPhone, so that's my primary phone. But in terms of any device that I'm using to record these videos, listen to music, listen to podcasts, um, anything that are those things, like browse the web, it's okay that the apps still receive updates, but the phone itself isn't receiving security updates, and I'm okay with that. So, as a companion, backup, secondary phone, whatever you want to call it, I want something that's relatively compact. And as you might have seen before, had my little first take thoughts on the Zenfone based off of what the internet currently says. But the Zenfone is $700. Technically, the Google Pixel 4 for me would be, I don't know, $15 because just paying for shipping to get it back here. And I would have the phone and I'd be perfectly fine. But I don't know if I want to go that route, mainly because, yeah, it is aging. And there's one thing in particular that I'll scroll down to the bottom of the page in a little bit to show you. But yeah, that is probably one of my primary concerns. So obviously, it's an LTE phone, not 5G. Perfectly fine with that. In fact, I usually turn 5G off on my devices because it's a battery suck and I don't really see any improvement in performance for what I use the phone for. So it doesn't really matter. I definitely want a compact phone, and I know the Zenfone is small. Okay. And it looks like the Pixel is a little bit taller and actually a little bit wider. So if I'm thinking that the Pixel is an okay size, I think I would love the Zenfone. So the more that I make these videos and the more that I watch the more that I watch videos, the more that I think about it, I'm like, man, that Zenfone is probably has a really, really, really good fit in the hand. In terms of what the stuff is made out of, I don't really care. Oh, but also you can see the Pixel's a little bit lighter, so that's nice. Gorilla Glass, sure. Again, these are going to be secondary phones, and because they're a secondary phone, as I continue to say, that $700 will be a bit much for it to be something that I use just to listen to Spotify. Like, and that's why I'm like, I don't know if I can stomach that. But Gorilla Glass Victus on the Zenfone, Gorilla Glass 5 on the Pixel, who cares? Whatever. Dual SIM on the Zenfone, single SIM on the Pixel. Again, perfectly fine. Water resistance is roughly the same. Both have OLEDs, just like the Pixel 6. The Pixel 4 has a 90 hertz refresh rate. Looks like they both support HDR. HDR Plus, since that's newer, would be obviously found on the Zenfone. Screen sizes, we have 5.7 versus 5.9, and that's a result of. We can look at the picture up here. There's a hole punch on the Zenfone versus actual bezels on the Pixel, which I've never understood why people are so opposed to bezels. Like, yeah, I just don't get it. It's, oh, we gotta minimize the bezels, so we gotta find places to put the camera and the earpiece. All right. And then, depending on what happens with the iPhone 14 that's supposed to come out or actually be announced later this week, well, next week, technically, you end up with stupid stuff. Like, I thought the punch hole was fine. You kind of just get used to it. I thought the notch was stupid. This pill shaped punch out that it looks like the iPhone's going to have looks dumb, but we just get used to it. I feel like one of the Galaxies had a pill shaped punch out at some point. I remember people did pretty cool things with wallpapers. I think it was one of the Galaxies. But anyway, it's okay to have bezels. Another reason I'm a huge fan of Sony phones is, yeah, they're just like, we're just going to keep these bezels, and because of that, we can now have both dual front facing stereo speakers. It's perfectly fine. With this, Google was able to put the facial recognition software or hardware in their Pixel 4. Like, it allows the manufacturer to do more stuff, and you as a consumer, it's fine. I mean, because you turn that Pixel 4 sideways, and whatever you're watching, now you have an uninterrupted screen versus punch outs or notches. So bezels are perfectly fine. But because of that, what some people complain about, yeah, you get a slightly smaller screen. Okay, we're talking what, 2/10 of an inch. Perfectly fine. Screen resolutions are, comparable. Pixel density is also extremely comparable. Always on display, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. The Pixel 4, of course, is going to get or has gotten Android 13. I doubt my dad has updated to it. And honestly, I kind of like updating or upgrading the phone myself. So I kind of hope he doesn't touch it. And I'm just, oh, yeah, new large download. Going from Android 12 to Android 13. So this will be the last update for that. And it will probably get one or two more security updates. It's all on Google's website. I just don't remember everything. But then, as I was mentioning before, with the Zenfone, they say 2 years of software updates, or two versions of Android updates, however they phrase it. And I'm sure they phrase it specifically how they do, because as I was mentioning before, okay, if your Zenfone comes out with Android 12, but by the time it's released, Android 13 has already been out for a month or some change. When you upgrade or update the phone to Android 13, Jesus, does that count as year one or upgrade one? Because if it does, I think that's pretty crappy. I feel like you should have been testing this phone with what you knew would be out when your phone was released. So I don't know the time frames. I don't know any of that, but I feel that, and actually, see, I can't say that because I feel like Google only released Android 13 probably for the Android Open System Project or Open AOSP, probably just about 2 or so months ago. So I can't make that statement, but what I guess I could say is, well, if Google can do it, it's possible for other vendors to do it. Like, it's not completely the same. I get it. Google, it's, oh, we're in charge of Android and we also have our own phone. So the likelihood of us being able to do something first is greater. But for a while, Samsung was pretty close. Like, yeah. And then even though when the Essential phone was around, I think they also got, let's say Android 10 or whatever it was, like the same day I think that the Pixels got it. So it's possible. It takes work, but it's definitely possible. So again, is Android 13 going to be the first Android upgrade for the Zenfone, meaning that Android 14 will be the last, which at that point is really just a year of support. So I don't know. We'll find out. But again, I mean, $700 either way. I would hope that we get 3, maybe 4 Android upgrades. So that's definitely something to consider. When it comes to literally everything else, except for the one thing at the bottom that I'll get to, it really doesn't matter for me because, again, well, one, the Zenfone is newer, so it's going to have better specs. But two, I'm using it as a companion device, so really don't care. Performance is fine. Storage is going to be 64 gigs or 128, but I'll be streaming most stuff anyway. Cameras are going to be fine for what I need them for. Yes, they both have stereo speakers. Nah, the Pixel doesn't have a headphone jack, which I knew that already because it's a pretty old device. Connectivity is not really a fair comparison, considering one phone is quite a few years older. Yes, the facial recognition versus the Face ID. But here's the one thing down at the bottom. When the Pixel 4 was even released, people were like, wait a minute. For what, 2019, I think, was the year that it came out. People were like, why is that battery so small? And I even think Rick Osterloh, I believe his name, was like the director of hardware for the Pixels. I forget the exact title, but even he was just like, oh shit. And for the Pixel 5, things changed. But 2,800 hour battery, milliamp hours, that was too small back then. So I know I'll be using it for a companion device, but I also don't want to have to charge it every day, knowing that I'm not even using it that much. So when we look at a battery that's 4,300 versus 2,800, it's like, but again, paying $15 to get it here as opposed to 700, and it'd be more than that for tax and shipping. Yeah, like that's not really a real distinguishing factor. Like, oh, well, the battery life on the Zenfone is better, but it's also $700. I mean, yeah, just the tax that I'm going to pay on the phone is more than I'm going to end up paying to get the Pixel 4 in my possession. So that's not really a huge thing, but it is something that I wanted to bring up for myself, so that way I know when I'm thinking about, like, oh yeah, I have to charge this phone every day, even though I turn it off at night, even though I leave it in airplane mode when I'm not actively using it. It's just a small battery. Terrible design decision. But it is what it is. And I feel Google, especially with the Pixel 6s, their batteries are substantially larger. And I forget what they were on the Pixel 5, but I know they were larger because they knew, like, yeah, 2,800, bad idea. Now, the last thing that I'll say, which honestly doesn't really matter, but in terms of design of the phone, and I noticed this when I had the Pixel 6a in my hand, is that the power button and volume rocker placement, more important than I thought. And as I'm holding this Samsung S22 in my hand, I think what's most important is for that power button to be readily accessible. Like where your hand sits, or where your thumb sits, I should say. I'm going to lock this phone, I'd say, more regularly than I'm adjusting the volume. So I like that my thumb rests right beneath the power button. If I need to lock it, boom, just slide my finger up, boom, lock it, we're good to go. If I need to change the volume, then yeah, I can do it, and it's not that hard to do. But I think the button that you use most should be closer to where the finger is that's going to use it when you're naturally resting your hand. And when it comes to the Pixel, that's not the case. The power button is up top and the volume rocker is beneath. And I'm just like, huh, that's interesting. And I'd almost say you can see it from the picture, which it's not completely true. But one thing I noticed with the Pixel 4 in particular, because again, I did have this phone before and I ended up sending it up to my dad. The buttons on the Pixel 4 were not very clicky. They were very mushy. And you're like, oh, like this just doesn't even feel good to use. Like why are these buttons so soft? And even with the Pixel 4a, which actually I think came out after the Pixel 5, there was some mix up back then. But I'll just say for the Pixel 4a and for the 5, I know the buttons got back to be really, really clicky, and that's a good thing. It's a solid, confident press. And with the Pixel 4, it just doesn't have that. So is that super important? The button placement, again, for a secondary phone, backup phone, music streaming device, content consumption device? Not really, but it is something that I know I'm going to think about. I'm like, ooh, this isn't comfortable to actually press. And I think the buttons on the Zenfone are pretty clicky. I mean, I don't know since I don't have it in my possession, but I can imagine that outside of the Pixel 4, because I had a Pixel 3, and I don't think the buttons weren't clicky, and the Pixel 2 is currently in my possession. The buttons are clicking. So I don't know what went wrong with the Pixel 4. Like they just did something different. Battery life was different. The Face ID was different, but good. No, I'll say facial unlock because Face ID is an Apple thing. But these buttons not being clicky, that was something else. So it's what happened with the Pixel 4 And then, yeah, they were like, well, the Pixel 5 is just going back to being just kind of a regular phone. So, but anyway, all that to say, whenever my dad gets the opportunity to set up his 6A, if he likes it, then I'll say, hey, great, go ahead and send down that Pixel 4, so we can continue to use it and it doesn't end up in a landfill somewhere. It could get recycled. That would be nice, maybe donate it. But maybe I'll do that with the Pixel 2. Maybe I'll officially retire that, which I don't know. But I'll continue thinking about this, just like I'll continue thinking about the Zenfone versus the Xperia 5 Mark IV. I have a Pixel 6 arriving in the mail, which I probably won't like, but for me, sometimes I just need to own it for a little while and then say, all right, cool. Now I know I don't like it. And boom, it goes off to somebody else's home. So time will tell. But I'm excited. I'm excited for my dad. I'm excited for myself. I'm just excited to hear about the Pixel 7 whenever that gets announced. One thing that I know I don't really care too much about is the Pixel Watch. Yeah, just don't think it's going to be a good device. Yep, that's it. I have a Fitbit, does what I need it to do, and the Pixel Watch looks like it's going to be not good. I could be wrong, but we'll see. Anyway, as I always say, I don't really have a good way to end these videos.